So I wanted to do my yearly DNFs. These are books that just didn't work for me. But I want to go over the ones that I definitely would not see myself ever picking up, like to try to like reread it, and see if maybe like the second time around, if it hits. So the first one would be Abby Jimenez, Part of Your World. I really disliked the heroine. I felt like the way the way Abby Jimenez wrote her is she came off very like young and immature to me. Like she seemed like she was like in her 20s, like early 20s, but this woman was almost 40. So it just seemed like the author made her very immature and didn't know how to survive without her parents' like money and influence, even though this woman was a doctor. So I would think that she would be more mature mentally, and I just felt like she was very immature, very snobby, and, like, because she hooked up with a guy who was basically, I think he was like a tow truck driver, but he also was like the mayor of the small town that she ended up like getting stranded in for the night. And the dude was like a really sweet guy. He like made her grilled cheese and everything and like, let her stay, at his place for the night. They had like hooked up. And this is the type of like book where I do consider it more of a women's fiction over a romance, just for the fact that it was more about her journey, and then you have, I would say this definitely, like, if you're a beginner when it comes to romance, like you're a beginner when it comes to reading romances, things like that, this book will probably appeal to you. Or anything by Emily Henry would appeal to you. Or there's other authors within that type of ilk, that type of writing style. Maybe like Catherine Center, things like that. Susan Elizabeth Phillips, all those authors are definitely more like light on the romance. And when it comes to like sexy times too, like for this one here with the Abby Jimenez book, when they did hook up that night, it was like fade to black. It was a fade to black, which I don't have a problem with if I know it's going to be an actual romance. And I just didn't feel like this was, It definitely felt more women's fiction-y to me. So I don't like that. If I'm going into a romance, I want to know it's a romance, and I want it to be a romance. I don't want to go and be like, how many chapters in? And be like, this is definitely not like a romance. This is definitely more women's fiction. So this is why it didn't work for me. And it just kind of let me know, like, Abby Jimenez is just not the author for me. Same thing with like Emily Henry and all these different ones. They're just not the authors for me. So I'd rather stick to authors that either I already know or ones that they're definitely like, this is a romance, So this one didn't work for me. But like I said, if you're new to the genre, if you're new to romance, these authors probably would work for you. But for me, who's been a romance reader for 20 plus years, these don't work for me. It just, they don't, they just don't work for me. I'm past that type of writing, so it just, yeah, they just didn't work for me. So the next one I was not a fan of was Gracie's Mom by Misty Walker. So you have, it's an age gap romance, and the mother, she has this daughter who's just getting out of college. So you're talking, this girl's probably around 22. Yeah, probably like 22. 21, 22, around there. Depends on what she started college. I'd say 18, around there. So her daughter has had this roommate for like how many years, but they've just been roommates, just friends. And so she decides to bring her male straight roommate to her mother's home, you know, for, I don't know, was it like vacation or something like that? Might have been like either spring break or winter break, something like that. But they basically were pretty much done with college. And so he, of course, has liked, you know, her mom for a while. And so they start hooking up with each other, you know. He's like 21, 22, around there. And her mother was like, I think in her 40s possibly. But the mom just came off like really immature to me, and then did not think about her daughter enough for the fact that her daughter had a crush on the roommate. And to me, I'm like, you know how they say like bros over hoes? Same thing applies for women, you know, chicks over dicks. I mean, honestly, if I was, you know, say if I was single, if I was a single mom and my grown daughter, who's, you know, like 21, 22, brings home her male roommate, and he's, you know, good looking, you know, and straight, and is sexually attracted to me, which I don't know why, is sexually attracted to me, I'm not going to play that. I would have been like, no, you're too, you know, you're too young. You're too young for me. You know, you need to be a certain age to ride this ride. So, you know, so for me, I just didn't believe it. And I just felt creepy to me, you know, for the fact that he's around the same age as her daughter. And I just like, I just can't, you know, I just couldn't get into it. And then the mother went from like mature mom to like schoolgirl, you know, like mentally. And I'm just like, no. I'm like, no. I don't like moms like that, where they can revert back to like their teenage years like really fast when they're with a young man. It just kind of shows to me that they did not mentally mature when they grew up, that they were kind of like forced to be in like this responsibility when they really probably weren't mature enough to be a mom in the first place, you know. I definitely consider myself more of like an old soul. I've never been interested in guys my own age. If I did date guys my own age, or like maybe they were slightly younger, it never worked out. I've always been interested in older men, because you know, I don't consider myself, you know, mentally 44, you know. I'm probably like mentally 50, you know. So I've never been that way. I've never been interested in younger guys. I could look at a young guy and be like, oh, he's cute. If I was like 21, I would have been all over him, you know, would have wanted him to like, you know, ask me out on a date. But to me, there has to be a certain maturity with both of the characters. And if I feel like one is kind of taking advantage of the other mentally, there's that power imbalance. And so age gap romances really have to hit for me. If they don't, they're just, it's a creepy old woman or it's a creepy old guy lusting after this young, immature person. And I just didn't feel that relationship between them two. So I couldn't continue it. And you know, the way the writing was, I was just like, ugh, it didn't work for me. So the next one, I did not like. And I probably offended some people over this book, was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. Now, this to me is hookup culture. Plain and simple. Hookup culture. I don't consider it to be a romance. And also the way the synopsis was described to me was not at all how the book was. The book synopsis basically made it sound like these two characters don't like each other. There was some kind of conflict that caused them to not like each other. But then she had to actually use him as like a skating pair partner because she's a figure skater and he's a hockey player. So she needed to use him. And then as they're working as partners when it comes to the, her, you know, figure skating pairs, they start to fall for each other. The book had it to where they met. She didn't automatically, she didn't like him. I did not see any reason of why she didn't like him, but she didn't like him right off the bat. And then shortly after that, they're hooking up in the bathroom. He's going down on her. And then they end up in a car with like a whole bunch of people. And he's inserting his finger into her hoo-ha. And to me, I was like, so you've already been hooking up at least a couple of times. Her pairs partner, who I realize that there are some guys in the figure skating world who actually are straight, but I was like thinking the guy was going to be gay, you know, because there is a high percentage of guys who get into figure skating who usually are gay. But, you know, this guy was straight. And was jealous of the fact that she had a hookup guy before she got to the hockey player. She had a hookup guy that, you know, the hookup guy ended up finding a girlfriend. So they're like, okay, we're not going to hook up anymore. And then she goes to the hockey player. And so her figure skating partner basically slut shames her at the party where she had come out of the bathroom with the hockey player. So her ice skating partner basically slut shames her. And then he gets injured. And now it's like she's forced to get another figure skating partner, and she gets the hockey player. And so I was just like, this is pure hookup culture. I just didn't feel the romance. I didn't feel like any connection. It just felt like it was just banging. That's it, you know, and it's so shallow to me and just so empty, such an empty existence to just use your body as just a receptacle, you know. It was just you know, I'm just like, even say if I was when I was 20, if I picked up this book, I'm not sure if I would even liked it then, you know. I don't think so. You know, maybe I would have like been fascinated with like the sex scenes, which weren't even really like highly descriptive, honestly. You know, they weren't even good like sex scenes, you know, when you look at it. It was just to me. It was very meh, very blah, you know, what they'd say mid, you know, where it's like mediocre, you know. It's very mediocre. So the next one I would say would be Kerrigan Byrne, The Duke. I'll just say, like, my only thing is the hero was an asshole. That's why I didn't finish this book. The hero was a major asshole. I did not like him at all. It was like, what's the, like an Amnesia trope where he ended up meeting this woman, and basically used her as a receptacle, for his, you know, himself. And she helps him, you know, when he gets injured in the war. And then he's like, doesn't remember her, you know, like he doesn't remember her name, but he feels like he has a connection to her. And I'm like, yeah, because you used her, dude. You slept with her. She never got her, you know, happy time. And then you went off to war, you know. And so to me, I'm like, this guy was such a dick. This guy was such a dick. And I was like, no, there's no redemption for this guy. No redemption. And I was just like so mad. I end up trying to read The Dead Romantics. What's this author's name again? Ashley Poston. Again, I feel like this author is definitely more women's fiction than actual romance. I was bored with this book. I couldn't, you know, I think I got through like 2 chapters of it and I was like, I was done. I ended up getting into some other books that were like supposed to be like thrillers. Like I tried to read The Hiker by MJ Ford. Um, it was basically about two sisters who really didn't like each other. One of them ends up going missing. And I didn't like hearing about the sisters, how much they hated each other. Because I was like, well, then why would you want to go searching for your sister if you hate her so much, you know? So I just didn't care for it. I was like, I don't like the like the whole description of like, oh, she had all these problems with her sister, but she decides, oh, I'm gonna go look for her anyway. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm like, if I hate my sister that much and she goes missing, I ain't gonna miss her, you know? Sounds mean, but you know, if you don't like your sister that much, why would you go searching for her, you know? So the next one was I tried to read The Guest House by Abby Frost. It was boring. It was a lot of people who went to this guest house to go and stay at, kind of like an Airbnb. And it was a lot of like characters talking with each other, like this one's talking with each other, and then you have these people getting over here and they're talking with each other. And it was a lot of nothing. It was a lot of nothing. And I was like, let's go. What's happening here? You know, so yeah. Nothing was happening. Nothing was happening. And I'm like, all these characters, and it's like a lot of nothing. And I'm like, is the book going to be like, how much in, like 60, 70% before we finally get to something? Oh, it was just boring me. I just couldn't, you know? The next one I tried to read, but I really wasn't caring for it. This is why I said, like, this author's definitely not for me, is, I tried reading People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Again, I do feel like this author's definitely more in the women's fiction section than she actually is in the romance section. The romances are all kind of like on the back burner. It's mainly about like their friendships, you know, it's like her getting together with her friends, and then they're discussing all this different stuff. And then, you know, it just was a lot of nothing. It was a lot of conversating, and I'm just like, this is boring. This is so boring. I could not continue with it. That's why I said she's definitely more women's fiction. If you're a romance reader for how many years, you may be bored. You know, you may be bored. I know I was. So the next one is, I really tried to get through this book. Wicked in His Arms by Stacey Reed. I was about 64% in when I said, fuck this. I stopped reading it. I had to throw in the towel and DNF this book, as I really enjoyed the beginning of the story, but within 30% of the book, he was having sex with the heroine and taking her virginity in a closet on a desk. Yeah. This was too insta-lust for me. Then the middle part started to slow down. I had issues with the hero and his hot and cold feelings. I said, then there were times I was irritated with the heroine, and I thought she was a ding-dong. So, I mean, honestly, it was a lot of, like, it was a mess. It was a mess for me. It was a mess. It was a whole plot mess. A lot of different issues that I had with it. I got to like certain points where I didn't like the hero, and you know, the way he treated the heroine, and there were times where the heroine just annoyed the fuck out of me. And just like I said, pure insta-lust. There was like this big closet that had enough, obviously had enough room where it had an actual fucking desk in it. And he like takes her virginity on the desk, and I'm just like, yeah. I had issues. I'm having like nasal issues right now. There might be a little too much dust in my closet. Maybe I'm picking it up. But the next one I would say it just didn't work for me is Our Last Night. I was bored with this book by Taylor Adams, because I actually liked her other book. I believe it's a woman who wrote this. I liked the author's other book. What was it called again? They made a movie out of it. No Exit. I really liked that book. I thought it was pretty good. You know, I enjoyed it. But this one here was boring to me. It was just so boring. I think it had to do with, did it have to do with a gun or something? I have to go, let me see. Yeah. The guy he was a professional ghost hunter. And so he went and he found this cursed, haunted, gun or something like that. And it was just so boring to me. I could not continue with it. So the next one I would say didn't work for me, but I'd say a lot of their books lately just haven't done it for me. Is Tiffany Roberts. If you know that they're, it's a couple who write together. Tiffany and Roberts, so it's Tiffany Roberts. I end up DNFing Yearning for her. I tried getting into it. I liked the cover. I thought the cover was really pretty. Oh, so I just tried to get into this and I just had a hard time. I didn't care for the way the story was progressing. And, you know, like I said, Tiffany Roberts, you know, sometimes I have a hard time with them because they get like a little bit too technical and it needs to be more romantic, you know, like a lot of their stuff, like their world building is really interesting, but sometimes they get a little bit too much of the world building and less of the character development and character growth and seeing this relationship and all that stuff. And some books work for me for the writing, and then some books just don't. And this one, unfortunately, I could not get into. Just couldn't get into. It's a shame though, because I really like the cover too. Then I had Cookies for My Orc Neighbor. I ended up DNFing this. I got bored and skimmed through the rest of the story. It's like one of those collaboration series where they have like multiple authors writing within the collaboration, and they all have to do with like, it all has to do with like orcs or, you know, something like that. Dang it. Go away, Siri. Dang. It all has to do with like orcs and things like that, like monster romances. It just didn't work for me. I felt like really bored reading it. You know, and Michelle Mills is kind of like up and down for me. There was like one book in her, like, there was the first book I read from her that I really enjoyed, and then there was a second book I ended up reading where the one monster was like in this closet for months and stuff like that, and I just was like, not closet, he was up in the attic, you know, he was up in the attic, and then also he was like sexually molesting the heroine when she was sleeping, and I'm just like, fuck, you know, it was like bonkers crazy story. And I just was like, it really kind of soured the author for me. So I tried to get into this one and it just didn't work for me. So the next one was Guarding His Obsession by Alexa Riley. This was cringe. I said they barely talk to each other and they're ready to hump. And honestly, that's what it was. Within 5 minutes of them knowing each other, they're ready to get down and dirty. And I'm like, girl, he's supposed to be your bodyguard. And you're already ready to like get into his pants. It definitely felt more erotic than romantic. And I just was like, I'm not feeling this. I'm like, I just can't. So I had to stop, you know, I just could not. So the next one I would say was Voices in the Snow by Darcy Coates. I really tried to get through this book. It really had a really great, interesting synopsis for it, where this woman ends up getting in this accident and she lost a bit of her memory, and she doesn't remember like exactly why she was traveling in the snow, but she knew it was obviously maybe some type of like emergency, because she's like, she normally wouldn't travel through the snow, like, you know, in a car if it was, you know, for an emergency. And so she ends up being rescued by this guy who lives in this like mansion, and there's a lot of like dark corners, and definitely like something's creepy about the house. And all of a sudden this woman like kind of shows up like in the shadows, and the woman looks like she wants to like hurt her and stuff like that. There's a lot of different things that were going on in the story. And so I really tried to get through it. And it was an interesting book, but it was so boring. It was so drawn out and so boring. I could not keep up with it. Maybe if I listened to it, like if it was something where it was on audiobook, I might have been able to get through it better through audiobook than for me reading it. I kept getting so like, my eyes just kept getting heavy. I was like, it's like one of those books where you try to get through because it sounds so interesting, but it's so boring. It's just so boring that it literally puts you to sleep, you know? So of course, you know, I tried reading another Emily Henry book, Book Lovers, and that didn't work for me. I ended up getting bored with that. And so I just was like, nope, I'm done. And, there was like several Darcy Coates books I've tried reading, and I'm like, I don't think this author's for me. I'm going to try, keep going because I have like how many of her books, but if I am bored with all the rest of them, she's just not for me. She's not the author for me. Then I tried reading The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This was a first-person narration. I wasn't a fan of the heroine. She definitely had a chip on her shoulder, and I really didn't like that. She's basically a bodyguard to this guy who was like a musician or something. I think he was like either an actor or a musician. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, I was bored. I was actually listening to this, and it just bored me. And I didn't like the heroine, so I ended up like DNFing it. The next one I would say that I was not a fan of was Haunting Adeline. So I tried to get into this one, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be another shit TikTok book. It's another crappy TikTok book. This was boring. I mean, for this guy was supposedly a stalker and was stalking the chick. She was so dumb. You know, she made so many stupid decisions. And I'm like, this bitch deserves to die. She deserves death because she's so dumb. She's one of those heroines that's like too stupid to live. So I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe that this book was so hyped up. It is so stupid. And the guy who was the stalker, I was just like, this guy's fucking weird, you know? Like, why would you be attracted to this guy? And it was just really fucking stupid, and it was so boring. And I'm like, this book is boring as fuck. I don't understand what the obsession is with this book. I mean, I was just like, what the fuck is this? It was so stupid. Oh man. So yeah, that was definitely a hard pass where I'm like, this is so stupid. And the fact that it got like a 4.01 on Goodreads is laughable. I'm just like, man, the amount of trash that TikTok like promotes is just astounding. Oh God. So yeah, it was so bad. So I'd say the next was Her Wicked Marquess by Stacey Reed. I ended up DNFing this. The heroine seemed way too immature for my taste. I did not like the heroine, like right off the bat. I was like, she's just so immature, and I'm supposed to believe that she's going to get together with, you know, the hero. No, that was a quick DNF. That was a quick DNF. So I tried to get into Succubus Blues by Rochelle Mead because a lot of people like promoted that series. So she's a succubus and she could shapeshift. She actually used to be human and she was turned into a succubus. I can't remember what it was for. Maybe it was for a man or something like that. I can't remember correctly. And so she ends up like getting like attracted to this author. And the author's very much kind of like more of an introvert, more of a recluse. And so she ends up working for like a bookstore and stuff like that. And then she's also screwing her manager at the store because, you know, she's a succubus. She, you know, basically, you know, gets life from, you know, people she has sex with. And so I guess for her, she felt like, oh, well, he's a dickhead anyway. And I'm just like, the guy's a married guy. Whether or not you're a succubus, you're having an affair with a married man. I just had trouble, like, grasping that, you know? And it just kind of bored me, so I ended up DNFing it. And I had the whole entire series. This is why I need to, like, stop buying an entire series of you know, this is a thing you know, that I've been trying to work on, you know, is don't buy a whole entire series if you're not sure if you're going to like the author's writing, you know? So I had to get rid of all the books because I was like, I wasn't feeling that first book. And I'm like, I ain't going to like the rest of them, you know? So the last two I was not a fan of is our Gargoyle's Delight. I said, this book is weird. It was so weird to me. It was Naomi Lucas and what was the other author right here? What's the other author? I gotta click on it. Mel Braxton. That's what it is. You know what? Some of these authors, like they have where they work together, it doesn't always work. You know, and to me, I'm like, I just feel like Naomi Lucas is definitely better on her own than working with somebody else, you know? And I said the storyline was boring. It didn't make any sense to me, and the heroine is really dumb. I DNF'd this book at 45%. So basically was, this woman was working at this museum in this, like, small deserted town, and she ends up, like, getting involved with the gargoyle that's in her museum. He ends up starting to come alive and stuff like that, and he grows a penis. And, like, it was just weird. It was just weird. I tried to stick with it, but I just lost interest. It was just like, this is so dumb. I could not continue with it. And the last one, I had given up on this within the first chapter, because to me, it's like, it definitely, there is a difference between erotica and romance. I don't want erotica. I want romance. So if you have sex on, like, the first chapter, I'm done. I'm done. I'm going to DNF it. You know, I can't always get into it. Sometimes the stories, like, especially if it was something where it's like the characters had, like, a one-night stand, and then you kind of, like, progress from there. Sometimes it works for me because one of my favorite books actually he had that premise, but it doesn't always work for me. This one definitely didn't work for me. I said it was too much erotica at the beginning and not enough romance. So it was Monster Pucker by Cleo Evans and Ashley Bennett. I do not like Ashley Bennett. I don't know what it is about that author, but I just don't like their books. And so I tried reading a novella with Ashley Bennett, or I did read it, but it was boring. It was a part of the Creepy Court anthology that I read in October, and I didn't care for the novella. So, like, you know, I tried reading a book of hers and I didn't care for it. And then the novella, excuse me. And then you have this one where it's like Cleo Evans and Ashley Bennett. And I liked Cleo Evans, like, when it comes to that novella that I read in the Creepy Court. But this one here just didn't work for me, because within the first chapter, this woman who's a reporter is hiding in, like, the locker room, and she sees, like, the two monsters that are, like, hockey players, which is like, so they're monsters and hockey players, and just like, I'm just like, okay, how many things do we need to make this story interesting, you know? I'm just like, sometimes a little bit goes a long way, and if we're here, it's like, okay, we've got hockey players, but they're also monsters. And they're also like, I guess you'd say bisexual, because the one was going down on the other in the locker room in a dirty talk and all kinds of stuff. Like, yeah, take it deeper and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, I just can't get into that stuff anymore. Like, maybe I would have like dug this 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but I can't get into that stuff anymore. I mean, I want my romances to be romantic. I want them to be romances. I don't want them to be just hookups, you know? And so for this here, it's like she's watching the two monsters, you know, like, you know, go down on each other and everything. And then, you know, they catch her, and then they're like, oh, you need to do stuff with us. And I'm like, within the first chapter? And I'm like, come on, man. So yeah, it was immediately DNF, and I was like, no, done. And I have returned it to Kindle because I was just like, really? So yeah, this year has pretty much told me that I am not looking for smut. I don't want smut. I don't want the romance to just surround itself around sex. I'm not into that. I want a romance. I want to see a buildup of a relationship and characters and things like that. Even when it comes to like my monster books, I want to see a nice monster, you know, get together with a woman, and I want them to be, you know, happy and you know, that stuff, you know. Even if I'm reading like a monster book, I want to see that romance. I want to see that build up between the characters, you know. I want to see them trust each other. I want to see that. And the fact that this here was just automatic, like, bing, 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 and I'm like, you know, yeah, it just, that frustrates me. It frustrates me. If you're looking for erotica, that'll do for you. That'll do. If that's what you're looking for, you know, you want erotica, you know. But for me, I want a romance. That's what I want. That's what I'm craving, you know, is romance. So it's not going to work for me. And I'd rather just DNF it than give it a really low rating. So yeah, that's why these books ultimately, I was like, I'm not going to read them and I'm not going to finish them because I'm just going to give them a low rating. And I'd rather not do that to the author. I don't want to give an author a low rating. I don't always like doing that. You know, sometimes I'll get through a book and I'm like, yeah, it's a 2. You know, it's a 2. But for these ones here, it's like, I know they're not working for me. I don't want to continue reading something that I am absolutely hate reading at this point. I don't want to hate read, you know? As soon as I start not liking a book and I'm like, this is not getting any better, it's getting worse, DNF. DNF, move on with your life. Read something else that's going to make you happy. But yeah, that's it for this video here. Is there anything this year that you just, you know, that you DNF'd, you were like, I just cannot get into this? Let me know down in the comment section, and we might share the same, you know, might share the same taste when it comes to that. Did you like any of these books, you know, that I DNF'd, you know, this year? Let me know. What were the reasons of why you really liked it? You know, because our tastes are going to be different, you know, and I'm not trying to shit on anybody's taste, you know, I'm not trying to, you know, yuck on someone else's yum, you know, that type of thing, you know, as another booktuber said. So really, it's like, it all depends on your tastes, you know, and what works for you, you know, books are subjective. So, if something worked for you and it didn't work for me, that's okay. So, but yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And I will see you all on the next video. All right. Bye.